Why is it that almost all the Armenian chant I've ever heard has this super dark quality
Sad.
to it? You know, sad,
Right.
dark.
Yeah, you need to know Armenian history actually. So Armenia, geographically, was kind of placed in a place that was under attack all the time, by Persian Empire, by Turkish Empire, by Mongolians, by even Roman Empire, from Byzantine side. And sometimes even, Armenia was not involved, but everything was happening right there because the Romans will come from the, to come to west, to east, and then Persians would come from the, southeast to go, and then the fight would happen right there in Armenian land. Basically, we didn't have a stable situation all the time. There was something going on, a war, a attack, and I think that had to do with it, and especially plus in the 20th century genocide,
Right, of course, the Armenian
which
Genocide.
the first, which was kind of first genocide in the 20th century. That was another one by Turkey, and most of the time, and Komitas, who compiled all those songs by going to villages, you see most of those songs are very sad. People are talking about, God, why is happening to us these things? Why are they attacking us? They took all my possessions, they came. I've been working in a field for the whole summer and now everything is gone. I don't have anything to eat. It's kind of a everyday kind of struggle that they're talking about in all these songs. So I think that had to do with the sacred music too. Psalm 35, for example, which goes a little bit more melismatic. Tatyater zaino sikvuk satenzis and then it continues, very slow.
Everyone, I'd like to welcome today Deacon Rubik, who is from the Armenian Apostolic Orthodox Church and a musician and very well versed in their musical chant tradition. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, so I'm super fascinated in the Armenian Apostolic Orthodox Church. I don't know that much about it other than I know it was the first Christian church, right? Wasn't Armenia the first Christian nation?
Yes, as a nation, basically, our church was established in 301, as being the Christian nation. So that is why we believe that we were kind of the first one. Because I think the next one was the 314, I guess, Catholic Church basically declared the nation. church. So that is what basically we think so, unless there is a new proof or something.
So it goes back a super long time. And and y'all are part of the Oriental Orthodox Church, right? So this is slightly different than the Eastern Orthodox Church because it's considered non-Chalcedonian, right? So y'all
Right,
reject the Fourth Ecumenical Council, but hold to the
right.
first three, so like the Coptics and Ethiopians and Syriac and those churches.
Malabar Indians, yes,
Yeah.
Indian church. Yes, we are in communion with those that you mentioned, but not with the Eastern Orthodox.
And there's a pretty good Armenian presence in Syria, correct? Like kind of throughout the
Yes,
Middle East, right?
yes, yes. Unfortunately, this recent war kind of made them leave, and I know that a lot of them moved to Armenia now because it's safer. But we had a lot of, yes, a lot of Armenians living in Syria, in Lebanon, of course, in Jerusalem. We started basically in Jerusalem since Christ's time. We have a quarter there, Armenian quarter, and we have been there since Christ's time. And we have a patriarchate in Jerusalem.
Hmm.
Also, we have another patriarchate in Istanbul, in Turkey. Um, and our Catholicos Mother Church, which is in Armenia, in Echmiadzin. So,
You said you have multiple patriarchs within the Armenian Church. So is there not like one Armenian patriarch?
right. There are two. There are one in Jerusalem, as I mentioned, and there is another one in Istanbul, in Turkey. Plus our head of the church, Catholicos, who is in Armenia.
Oh, okay. So there's sort of like three then.
Well, the mother church in Armenia basically presides over the Jerusalem and also the patriarchate in Istanbul. Yeah, so
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just wasn't sure
is like,
exactly
yeah,
how the polity worked.
right. The mother church, the Echmiadzin, is the head basically. The other are branches, although they are self-governed, governed, but somehow the Armenian Catholicos has a power over them, basically.
And so tell me about yourself. So I guess you've been a part of the church for your whole life, and what is and I know you know a lot about the chant, but
Well, I studied, yes, and I'm still learning. It's it's a long process. I studied music. I started early, actually, in church music when I was young, and singing in the choir, and then after that, decided to go professionally and learn Western classical music. So that's how I continued my education in college. And after graduating from college, then I studied choral conducting basically in college and got a graduate degree in choral conducting. But then I wanted to kind of be in more Armenian church music. Went to seminary at in New York. We have a St. Nerses Seminary in New York, which is affiliated with St. Vladimir's Seminary. So both of them
okay.
basically are together, and so went to those both and kind of got more theology basis from those seminaries. Not that much music, I need to say, because already I was kind of okay in the music. So and there wasn't higher education of kind of music in the seminary at that time. Unfortunately, we don't have a set kind of academic studying for music at the seminary. So it's just only is based on the theology and liturgical, basically, services and everything. Yeah. So that's how I ended up there, and then learned that. And then after that, the St. John Armenian Church in Detroit wanted a director, so they approached me, and the rest is a kind of 27 years of work at St. John Armenian Church, me being as a music director.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I have a friend in the OCA who she wanted to get a master's in church music to, help with being a choir director in the OCA, but there's not really a good church music program for them either. So she went to St. Tikhon's to get a master's in theology at the seminary, and that worked out, but there wasn't really a church music degree in the same way as maybe if you were Catholic, something like that. In Armenia, what is the musical education like? So, for example, like in Greece, I know to become a master chanter, it takes years and years, and there's a very, formulated process that you have to go through. Is it similar, like in Armenia itself, or not so much?
Not so much. I need to say, first of all, we don't have a degree, for example, in music. For secular music, there are nice conservatories and nice, way of studying. But for sacred music, you basically go to seminary in Echmiadzin, which Mother Church. There's a Kevorkian seminary, actually, established by one of the Catholicos from the 19th century, Kevork the Fourth, or George the Fourth. And you just go there and attend regularly. You learn the chantings, but it's a kind of mostly oral tradition still. And by standing, in the chancel for the services and everything else, you basically learn that way. Although recently, I need to say, within this past, I guess, 30, 40 years, they have been introducing some musical notation to them. They're studying music, but there is just to know how to read and sing those chants, but usually it is about 5 years of service at the seminary, and after 5 years, whatever you get from the music, basically that is it. You are then ordained as a deacon, and then you decide if you want to become a priest, a celibate priest, or a married priest. So we have those two choices. Then you're ordained as a priest, and you continue whatever parish you are assigned. That is all. I mean, you don't have like a degree to be a cantor, for example, or it's mostly to prepare you for priesthood. Like, for example, in Mother Church now, they're hiring professional musician to do the directing and teaching, and that professional musician usually is not going through a seminary. It's just a musical education, and knows how to work with the choir. The rest of and usually that is for only the divine liturgy on Sundays. The part that the other sacraments or services are involved, it's just the priest and deacons that they do those chantings.
And the chant itself, everything I've heard has been choral music. It's generally been either the Komitas, divine liturgy, or I think almost everything I've heard is Komitas. But Armenian chant itself, is it historically, has it been more monophonic? Like Zanomany chant, or some of these ancient chants that are like one line at a time, or has the choral aspect of it like been a central part of it from its inception?
No, choral music was introduced to us at the beginning of the 20th century, I need to say. Maybe
Okay.
late 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. Before that, everything was melodic, basically, like a Znameni chant, one melody only. That was how the music of the church and the whole services were done. I need to, if you want me to just generally talk about the sacred music of our church, I can say that um, um, basically we followed from beginning of the church that it was established what the gospel dictated us. Our church fathers kind of followed the Ephesians, for example, 5:19, which says, let the Holy Spirit fill and control you. Then you will sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. That's how they started. Earlier time, it was just based on the old tradition, singing psalms, very simple ones. And then little by little, they added some hymns to it. And then as it progressed, we started creating some spiritual songs, kind of a. But up until 20th century, everything was melody, basically, based on a melody, one line music, and no harmony, no drone sound, nothing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was it congregational, or was it mostly chanted by a chanter or group of chanters?
No, it was congregational, actually. It was kind of the whole community was involved. They would come together and they would, by attending church, orally they would learn all those songs and psalms and everything. So it was, yes, it was a kind of a community act. The characteristics of the songs were that basically the central role was to carry the word of worships to the people. And they were, as I said, monophonic, and they were based on the tones. We have like 8 tones, again, the same thing as octaios that we have in the
Mm-hmm.
Byzantine church, but not the same kind of intervals and that same system. It's not the system, it's just the naming kind of, we have 8 tones, which is assigned not only to the hymns, but also to the prayers. So it depends what feast is it or what day it is. The church calendar says like this prayer goes to the first tone, and then this song goes with the first tone. So everything kind of lines up together. And then we are using the alphabets for the tones. The first letter of the alphabet is A, for example, in Armenian. So it's A, at tone A. First tone is A, for example. Second tone is B, and those kind of things. And it goes all the way to, A, B, C, D. Each tone has also a subsidiary tone, just like a Byzantine chant, which we have like a hypo, for example.
Right, like the
Dorian
plagal
and
version,
right,
like
right,
Dorian, Hypodorian. So it's sort of the
right,
same in
exactly.
ancient
Yeah,
Armenian.
right. the naming, basically. We have first tone, and then first subsidiary tone, and then second tone, second subsidiary tone, that way. But the music-wise has nothing to do with Byzantine kind of melody. Although Komitas, you mentioned Komitas, believe that our system also is based on the tetrachord. It's basically four chords going, and then the next stanza starts with another 4/1. So, but not that much studying has been done really to find out. We start chanting, for example, the leader, usually the leader who's going to starts that chant just like giving the tone to everybody, and then after that everybody starts singing the song. And those tones each are assigned to a psalm. So we chant a psalm based on the first tone, for example, and then right after that we start the song, which is completely different from the beginning of the song, the psalm. It's a melodic line, basically. I need to say,
Right.
and then everybody knows that, oh, okay, this is the first tone, it goes like, this way, and then they stay in that melody to sing.
Okay.
As I said,
Is it with its own sort of
needs to be,
recitation formula as well?
well, nowadays actually we have in a Western notation. So when you continue after that, basically you have the all music in front of you, and you can sing. So you don't need to improvise. But I believe in the old time they were kind of improvising, basically, the way that tone was.
So the tone was like a scale.
Right. It gives you the scale, and then you know that, for example, we are in a C major, and we need to basically everything stays in the C major, which is it's not correct to compare that way, but just for Western music people, it's like that, to just understand how it goes. They are basically as most churches, we have chanting of scripture, which is very simple recitation. It's just like gospel reading, but you are basically reading the gospel in a kind of a tone, a little bit, not too similar to singing, or then we have psalm singing, which sarmoserkuchun we say in Armenian, and then we have chanting of litanies, which deacons usually do, and then the last one is the spiritual songs, which they are also, and each of these are divided into different kind of categories, or they're classified in different ways. For example, the first one is easy, so for example, I said the first category was the chanting of scripture, basically, which very simple. Our Lord Jesus Christ says, for example, we do everything in Armenian, actually, not in English. I'm just giving you an English example, but in Armenian, basically we chant the Armenian gospel, especially it needs to be Armenian. We haven't changed the language. We have some pauses to the end of the sentence, and very simple kind of up and down of the text. That is the chanting of the gospel. But psalm singing has a few different categories. For example, there is a chant, Psalm 100, make a shout to the Lord, all lands, serve the Lord with gladness. a simple kind of up and down. The first one is very simple up and down of the melody, which goes Ագեցեք արդեր ամենայն երկիր, ծառայեցեք Տյարն ուրախությամբ. That is basically kind of a simple version. And then we have a little bit elaborate of that, which will be Psalm, for example, 113. Blessed be the name of the Lord forever and ever. Praise the Lord, O servants of the Lord, and praise the name of the Lord. We sing like Yeritzi anuntjar nornial haisam hedem inchev havityan. Ornetsek mankun kaster yev ornetsek zanuntyan. It's and then it repeats the same thing. Basically the same thing, which is a little bit kind of singing way. Then we have a little bit more kind of elaborate one. And these are done basically antiphonally. So one deacon starts one side and the other one starts from the other side, answering and back and forth.
And everyone's singing along with the deacon.
Yes. I mean, nowadays, unfortunately, people, because they're not coming to church that much, only come like maybe 30 minutes at the end of the liturgy. Most people don't know, especially in US. Most people don't know these songs, and unfortunately, that is kind of that is why actually we started choirs. We didn't have choirs before. We started choirs because of that. In the 20th century, choir is a kind of 20th century, right? And lead the congregation, because really nobody could sing anymore. These things, except for the deacons and priests and those who were involved with that. Then, we have a little bit elaborate also way of singing psalms, like Psalm 35, for example. O Lord, oppose those who oppose me. Alleluia. Declare war on them for their attack on me. Alleluia. That is Psalm 35, for example, which goes a little bit more melismatic. Tatiater zainos ikvux atensis. And then it continues, very slow and kind of good, has a nicer musical line. Beautiful. Basically, to it. Yeah. Then, as I mentioned, the third one is the chanting litanies, which usually deacons do, and these have a kind of semi-musical, way of doing. I don't have translation of this, but one of them we start like arise and let us arise from the sweet. This is what actually we do on a night service of which happens during night, and it talks about arise from the sweet sleep, and basically we let us worship. Worship God to keep us safe, and in those kind of way. It goes Zaratusyal Ammenekiani hangastene kno Zorchoyats mes martaser nastvatsi mechitarutyon yevis popanastagarutyaan meru. And then it continues, that way, and so it has some responses to it that some people respond to it, to the deacon who is chanting, basically. Then the spiritual songs are a kind of addition that we started having from probably 9th century after, and the 10th, and then until about 15th, 16th century. They are more melismatic. These songs are called Sharag notes, Sharaganner, which is basically the main hymn of the church. We have about 1,100 of those that it's called Sharagan. It is. Then we have Dar or Ode, Kans, which is like it means treasure. Avedis, which is good news, and meriti or melody songs. These are basically now songs, and they are longer and they are more melismatic, I said. And generally they are performed solo. They are not done with the choir because they are a little bit, yeah.
Would Sirt M. Sasani, would that be one of these?
Oh yes, yes. Because of that, Sirdim Sasani is one of those kind of difficult songs that it goes, from one one tone to another tone, and it has a very kind of a melismatic line to it, and yes, that is a good example of a treasure. Actually, that's Kant's category. Yeah. If I can give you, for example, the first category, which is a little bit syllabic, for example, let's say early Sharagans. Basically, we started early hymns from 4th century of the establishment of our church, basically. Some of these were translations, like when Saint Mesrop and Saint Sahag, who started the Armenian alphabet. That's Saint Mesrop basically created Armenian alphabet in the 5th century. He started translating some of these songs from Eastern Orthodox or Byzantine kind of traditions. And then
what
later...
was his name again?
Mesrop.
Mesrop, yes. And he helped create the alphabet.
He was the only one who created the alphabet, yes.
Interesting. That's a nice parallel with the Cyrillic alphabet from Saint Cyril and Methodius. So it's interesting.
Yes.
There's more than one instance of an alphabet being created by a saint for the purpose of transmitting liturgical material.
Yes, and right after that, then he started translating, and the first book actually was translated was the Gospel.
That makes sense.
And it is being told that still now it's the best translation actually. It's called the Golden Translation.
Wow.
Yeah. So he translated that, and also he created he composed some songs, but the early songs were kind of very simple, as I said, syllabic maybe, and just like Gregorian chant, and this is like attributed to him. This song is called Father of all mercies, basically. Hayr Pazum Vohorm. It goes like this. Hayr Pazum Vohorm Yahostovanim Marquez Forbez Anarak Vortin Tovinzes Mersim Yevormia. Very kind of, it's just 2 notes up and down, just like, Gregorian chant. Not very simple one, and then syllabic, because the text at this time was much important, and you had to bring out the text. It says,
and this is 5th century?
He basically created alphabet in 420. Yeah.
Okay, and these melodies, can we be sure that they also go back to that time?
Well, they are we are saying attributed to him, because based on the early historians that we found, they said that these were created by him. And also some of his pupils told, we have a book written by one of his students, and he basically tells that he was doing this thing. He was composing these songs, and he was trying to translate these songs from some other places too. So this song was basically saying, I confess to you, Father of all blessings, like the prodigal son, forgive my sins and bless me. It's a kind of penitential hymn. And most of these penitential hymns that we do during Lent are attributed to him, actually. And they are very simple melodies. Yeah.
Now, just wondering, these melodies, was there any sort of notational system that was passed down from super early times to preserve it? I mean, I know like there wasn't the same thing as we have now with Western music notation, but was there some kind of neumes or diacritical marks or, some sort of notational system?
Oh, yes. From that early time, actually, we created some spatial notation system. Our fathers basically started that. Some of them basically, I'm sure, inherited it from other traditions. But at this time, we had punctuation signs. These were kind of punctuation signs, because Komitas kind of categorized that in the three kind of levels of neumes or ecphonetic signs. The first one was very simple, which was called punctuation signs, and they were used for the gospel chanting. They were basically periods and some dash up and down and pauses and simple, maybe 4 or 5 signs, and they were using for the gospel chanting. And then from let's say from 6th, 7th century up until 10th century, they kind of started making some new signs and started notating those hymns with those a little bit advanced kind of signs. And then after 10th century, the third basically category of signs came. And by the way, we call these signs khaz notation. We say like a KH, because there is no ch sound in English. We kind of transliterate it as a KHAZ, khaz notation. Okay. So the third category was more elaborate kind of signs, a little bit. If I can show you, like I have a little bit of that version here. I don't know if you can see that. So these are basically signs that were used for the third category, basically more elaborate ones. And Robert Atayan, the kind of musicologist who was in the Soviet Union 20th century, he put this table together, which I just showed you. He thought that there were like 25 signs of this. But later, Komitas actually studied for 20 years of these signs, and he believed that there were more than 25, and then there were almost, 100 signs of that. And that was the reason that it got very complicated, that basically we forgot how to read these signs. And nowadays, then we have forgotten, and nobody can read these signs. So after, I would say, 15th, 16th century, then the key to these signs were lost. And after that, basically, it was forgotten, and nobody can read those signs and see how they sounded at that time. But in the late 18th century, kind of beginning of the 19th century, somebody in Turkey by the name Hampartsul Limonjian created a new system of khaz notation, taking some of those old signs, that just the shape of it, and then creating a kind of a one scale. And these are these signs that he created based on, and then you see some similarities on the old signs. So he created this 7 basically or 6 notes here, and he started notating these the whole hymnal with his students, actually. So we have that hymnal now on those notation, which we can read that. So by that, he kind of preserved the tradition of singing in the early 19th century, which is very interesting, because now, even when we compare, because we can read this now, we compare that with the oral tradition sometimes that we see now, our deacons are singing or our priests are singing. Still, I mean, it has changed a lot. Even within the 100 years, you know, there's you see when I compare, for example, one hymns from that book and the way that I hear, you know, some of our deacons are singing that book, it's slightly different. Based on from where this deacon is coming, like from Armenia tradition, from or from the one who's from, for example, studied in St. Narcissus, or the one who studied in Jerusalem, or the one who studied in Istanbul. You see, you know, a kind of a different kind of tones from each one, which is very interesting.
And do a lot of people read this Chaz notation?
No. These ones, you mean this later edition, later ones? No. Our priests and deacons don't read these. So they are basically now trained as a Western musical notation, not these ones. I was able to basically go back and study those by myself, and basically try to transcribe some of those music from the hymnals that we have. Yeah, and if I can show you, for example, one page from the hymnal which I didn't bring. Oh, like this one, for example. For example, this is what I did. Let's see, go back a little bit. So this is the Trisagion here with a Western notation, and the top part here is in that notation, the Limongian notation. So it goes sur pastvat sur pievazor sur pievanma or hariarimerelos formiames. You know, just low, just a trisagion, basically. Yeah, it is very different. You see that in there.
Yeah, for sure. I will say all the music, even as you demonstrate it, has this dark quality to it. You know, sort of like the harmonic minor or a Phrygian kind of feel. Why is it that almost all the Armenian chant I've ever heard has this super dark quality to it? You know, sad,
Right.
dark, kind of metal. Like I understand. Do you know the pianist Tigran Hamasyan?
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what other Armenians think about him, but I understand, why he was into heavy metal. Heavy metal and super sad music, and I'm like, because that's like what the music sounds like, and so.
Yeah, you need to know Armenian history actually. So Armenia, geographically, was kind of placed in a place that was under attack all the time, by Persian Empire, by Turkish Empire, by Mongolians, by, even Roman Empire, from Byzantine side. So, and sometimes even, Armenia was not involved, but everything was happening right there because the Romans will come from the to come to west to east, and then Persians would come from the southeast to go, and then the fight would happen right there in Armenian land. So so basically we didn't have a stable situation all the time. There was something going on, a war, a attack, and I think that had to do with it. And especially plus in the 20th century genocide,
Right, of course, the Armenian
which
Genocide.
the first, which was kind of first genocide in the 20th century. That was another one, by Turkey that kind of added to that too, and most of the time, and Komitas, who compiled all those songs by going to villages, you see most of those songs are very sad. People are talking about, God, why is happening to us these things? Why are they attacking us? They took all my possessions, they came. I've been working in a field for the whole summer and now everything is gone. I don't have anything to eat. It's kind of a everyday kind of struggle that they're talking about in all these songs. So I think that had to do with the sacred music too.
Right.
That
That's interesting. So it was sort of in the middle of all these conflicts. It was like empires would come, and then they would come to Armenia and fight there. And so,
right. Yeah, and sometimes Armenians had to get ally with one of them, so they would kind of, be with one of them, and then as soon as they would do and then leave, then the other one country would come and attack us because we were kind of allied with them. So, we have been allied with the Roman Empire with a lot of time because, we were Christians. And the Romans basically, when we would come, trust us, so we were allied with them rather than being with Persian Empire. And at the beginning, one of the first major war was with Persians because they wanted to convert us to Zoroastrians in the 5th century. And we were still, at that time, we were all Christians at that time. Although they were able to win the war, but they were not able to convert us to Zoroastrianism.
right, and there's still a fair number of Armenians in Iran, right? Isn't there like a
Yes,
like a contingency of Armenian Orthodox, like in, was it East Iran?
oh sure, yeah. No, even in Tehran, there is a lot of Armenians. I know that after the Iranian Revolution, a lot of them moved to California. So there is a big community of Armenians now living in Glendale, California. Yeah.
And if you don't mind my asking, and if you want me to delete this later, that's fine. But I am curious, since we're talking about the geopolitical state of things, what exactly is going on now with Azerbaijan? So I see a lot of stuff about Azerbaijan and Armenia, but I don't really understand it. So I was wondering, like, what your take was on it. And again, if you want me to delete this later, I'll delete it.
Well, yeah, I'm not politician, but I need to say, so the Armenians, as you probably know, even with the Turkey, part of the Azerbaijan plus part of the eastern Turkey used to be Armenia. After genocide, basically Turkey took over, major kind of land, basically pushed Armenians back to the now Armenia that it is, which is a very small part. Even on, I don't know, 30,000 kilometer or square mile, I think, square mile. So it's even smaller than one of our states, in U.S. But and the same thing basically. Armenians were living. A lot of them were living in Azerbaijan, in a western Azerbaijan, which was part of Armenia at one time. So until the Soviet Union collapsed, they were living there, and then Stalin gave that to that part that Armenians were actually beginning with, was Armenia, part of Armenia, and Stalin gave that to Azerbaijan. But Armenians started. Armenian stayed there, and they were living there until just recently. But when the Soviet Union collapsed, and at that time there was really nothing, because during Soviet Union there was no border between those republics, within the Soviet Union. Within the Soviet Union, everybody was supposed to follow Russian language and Russian, culture and everything. So when Soviet Union collapsed, then somehow uprising started, and there has been, because of genocide, because Azerbaijans are also Muslims. I mean, 99% are Muslims basically. And they speak the Turkish language basically. It's a slightly different kind of dialogue, but it is the same language. They started basically throwing everybody out, all Armenians out of Azerbaijan. And those are the people who were living there for centuries. So then Armenians started defending themselves, and there was a war earlier which Armenia helped those people to kind of defend themselves. And we got part of that area in the western Azerbaijan. And for almost 20 years, basically they were living there from early times. They started living there, and nothing happened till the Azerbaijani regime started basically getting help from Turkey, from even Israel, and getting some, within this 20 years basically started getting arms and this and that, and then finally started another war and started killing Armenians, and Armenians had to leave that area. So now that Artsakh area, which is the Nagorno-Karabakh, which is the western part of Azerbaijan, then there aren't that many Armenians now living in there because they had to leave. It was not safe. So, that was kind of a thing that happened. Now they had to move to New Armenia now, that to be safe. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know. There are some political kind of things that, who was involved. Basically, this was Russian politics, because at one point and I don't know if you want to keep it or not, but there are two sides to the story. The earlier government which Armenia had, the presidents, basically, they were more pro-Russians. So that's why Russia kind of was helping Armenia. But once the new kind of government came and with the president, and they showed some interest to the West, then Russia stopped his assistance to Armenia, and Armenia was kind of left alone. And then Russia started helping Azerbaijan. So basically they started doing this thing. So, there is always that kind of side.
Getting caught in the middle.
Yeah, it's really not just between Armenia and Azerbaijan. It's a kind of a bigger kind of geopolitics, as you said, involved.
It's sort of a proxy conflict.
Exactly. The same thing that is happening in Ukraine now, Same thing that has happened. And same thing happened in Georgia, basically, some time ago,
I was going to ask about Georgia, too. What's the relationship between Armenia and Georgia? Is it a amicable one? And then I'm really more interested in the churches themselves and all of that, or not so much, or it seems that Georgia was not caught up in the conflicts of the region nearly so much, that they just kind of hung out in the mountains, and every now and then there would be some invaders, or for sure the 20th century was rough on Georgia, and the 19th century was pretty rough on Georgia as well. But it seems, I don't know, from what little reading I've done about Georgia, it doesn't seem as though they've been in the middle of the conflicts, as many conflicts as, for example, Armenia has been. So, what's the relationship there, Georgia and Armenia?
Well, we have and there has been always a lot of Armenians living in Georgia, but we haven't had very friendly kind of relationship with each other. And Georgia actually helped also during this war, and they helped Azerbaijan rather than helping Armenia. So that was another thing. Yeah. But part of it that also it was different from Ukraine involvement. It's because Georgia didn't want to be part of NATO. So they basically, that's why Russia didn't, completely attack them. So that was the difference. But they kind of showed some interest toward Western countries, and they were able to make big improvements in Georgia. As far as the living condition, as far as the everything, historically Armenians and Georgians have not been good with each other. I don't know why. I know that we claim that just like Saint Gregory, the Illuminator, who was the head of our church, established our church, he actually ordained the first Catholicos of Georgia, and their church basically started that way. But they don't believe on that. In our, I guess in our history we say that, but you might want to delete that. I don't know. but because originally they didn't have a Catholicos. Like us. Like Saint Gregory went to Byzantine and he got ordained. He came back, and then he ordained the Georgian kind of patriarchate. Yeah. So anyway.
Interesting.
Back to ARC. Yeah.
There's all kinds of conflicts. Like I said, I just did one on
a
Melanchoran chant, and these two churches that have the exact same rites and virtually identical theology and liturgy. And then I post this video and saw these comments like, "That's the Church of Satan," and I'm like, okay, I just want to know about the music and the chant, and it's like,
Right.
I'm not a politician. It's like we're supposed to love our enemies and pray for those that use us and all of that. So I intend on trying to interview as many chant experts on basically every Christian tradition that I can, do, and it's like if people from various churches don't get along, like what's new, happens.
Right. And another thing I can say, and if you want to delete that also you can, but based on our early history, actually, the Saint Mesrop, who invented our alphabet, he also invented Georgian alphabet.
Really?
That is what. But still, they deny that. I mean, the Georgians deny that.
Okay.
Because Saint Mesrop actually was fluent in all those languages at that time, even Greek, Greek language, Latin, Syriac, and then based on all those, he invented Armenian and Georgian. So those are kind of what it was said at that time with the students of the Saint Mesrop. So where were we?
Well, I must say I do love some Georgian chant as well, though. I don't know if you.
Oh, I do too. Especially, and there's also basically the new 20th century very good choral tradition. I mean, music talks to everybody.
Like they had polyphony, of course, and they had this like crazy sounding polyphony from forever ago, with these weird fourths and stuff and different tuning system, and it's fantastic. But it's one tradition among a lot of other traditions. So
yes, and we started the 4-part harmony also from the 20th century. So as I said, we didn't have that tradition until the early 20th century. Some of our musicians who were studying actually at Echmiadzin, the mother church in Armenia, and because late 19th century, the center of the theology and music and education was the mother church. Had a good seminary there and school. So after studying our liturgy, then they went to Russia and they started studying music there. And when one of them was Magar Yegmalian, who got the melodies that we had at that time in the early 20th century that we were singing in the church, and he harmonized that in a 4-part Western harmony, and that was actually his thesis when he was studying at St. Petersburg, I guess, in Russia.
Is this pre-Komitas?
This is slightly pre-Komitas. They were kind of both at the same time, but Komitas was a little bit younger than him, so he already had gone to study music, but Komitas still was in the seminary. Okay. And Komitas actually at one point studied with him, studied theory of music. Although then later he criticized him of putting this in a 4-part harmony, Western harmony, because he said our music lines are not set for the vertical kind of harmony, because what Yegmalian did, and most of our churches now are singing Yegmalian music, Badarak, divine liturgy, basically. The divine liturgy that we're singing, especially in U.S. churches, if you go, they are all singing Yegmalian version of the divine liturgy, which is based on the 4-part harmony.
Later, Komitas, didn't he also include harmony? Like, I thought he also arranged a bunch of stuff.
Yes, he did. He did. But he did more contrapuntal kind of harmony. It was not, vertical. So if you listen to his music, just one line goes, and then the other line starts from here, and then next line comes from down. So it's a kind of a line, because he wanted to show the line kind of more than kind of a, Western kind of based harmony.
So most of the divine liturgies done in the U.S. are not Komitas, they're Yegmalian.
Right, because Komitas is very hard. Actually, yesterday I did mine. I've taught my choir Komitas, and Komitas actually wrote only for men voices. Because again, until the 20th century, women were not singing in our churches. It was only male voice.
Even in the congregational stuff? Because you said a lot of it was monodic and antiphonal, right? So then,
right. No,
I guess women would be joining along for that, right?
Right. Well, what I'm saying, the choir did not have women voices, but congregation, yes, everybody was singing, and then women, were part of that too, yes. But when we started having choirs, it was only for male kind of choir singing, because that was the tradition of the time. Women voices were not allowed. But 20th century kind of changed that, and especially with Yegmalian doing 4-part harmony, added a soprano voice on top and an alto and a, bass and tenor.
Yeah, you kind of need ladies to sing soprano if you don't have a significant boy choir tradition.
Right. But Komitas did in a treble voice first, actually, for the seminarians, because he was teaching after he graduated, he was teaching at the seminary, and he had a 3-voice treble choir. So he arranged for those 3 voices first. And then later, he went to Germany, actually. He went to Germany and he studied music in Germany. And based on the influence that he got from German music and 2 of his professors, actually, he got interested into arranging the divine liturgy in a kind of a contrapuntal bass harmony rather than vertical harmony, because he studied with Oscar Fleischer. I don't know if you are familiar with him, but he was a very famous early music kind of professor. Fleischer basically influenced him a lot. And another one was Heinrich Bellermann, which was a composer and music theorist at that time. So he learned that the origin of all music is singing, and referring to Greek music theory, he believed that all music was originally diatonic and divided into tetrachords. So this was basically Bellermann that believed in that theory, and I think he influenced Komitas on that too. So the next one was the Fleischer, which he was a philologist and expert on early music notation. And Komitas adopted basically his approach of the Num notation, and which with the significance of the text based on the elements of the authentic notation of music. Yeah, he was a kind of pioneer, and he was expert on Middle Eastern music. That's how I guess Komitas was kind of influenced by them.
So if
And
people
when he
don't
came
know,
back,
because I know
yeah,
Komitas is a huge name in the Armenian Church, but outside of the Armenian Church, I don't know how many people know of Komitas. So, I mean, if you don't mind giving a short little succinct biography, who is Komitas and why is he so important to the Armenian Church?
yes. So Komitas was born in Turkey now, actually, in kind of one of the cities in Turkey, which we call it Western Armenia. We at that time was a Western. It was a Western Armenia, but nowadays Turkey, and he had a very sad kind of childhood. His parents passed away when he was 11 years old. And for that reason, one of the priests at that time decided to bring him and put him in the seminary in Echmiadzin, which mother church in Armenia. And that's how he got into the seminary and started studying the sacred music. But because he had a good voice, actually, he was able to get into the seminary. At that time, believe it or not, if you didn't have a good voice, you couldn't be accepted to the seminary. Nowadays, we don't do that, but one of the first thing was you had to have a good voice, because obviously it was important. I need to mention that about 90%, even more than that, of divine liturgy that we do every Sunday is singing. Basically, priest sings, the deacon sings, chant, or the choir sings, and everything is back and forth answering to each other. There is not that much speaking part going on, except for some secret prayers that priest does while he's at the altar. The same thing with daily hours. We call it singing hours. All of those daily services basically have chants to it, and litanies, everything we chant. That's why we call it singing hours, not daily hours. So anyway, back to Komitas. Because of his good voice, he got to seminary, and he studied all the subjects of the whatever was taught in that, and it was not only music and liturgy or theology, but also mathematics and everything else, And he graduated from seminary early, I think late 1900. Graduated and then he taught a few years at the seminary. One of the teachers actually liked him. Our teacher of music actually liked him, because at that time, even when he was studying, he was letting him to teach the class while the teacher was going someplace else. He was teaching the class. So he was very talented, I guess, at that time. But then he was able to get a scholarship to go to Germany and study music in Germany. As I said, with through kind of three teachers who were very big influence on him: the Heinrich Bellermann, the Max Friedlander, and Oscar Fleischer. They were kind of his teachers at that time. But only he studied for 3 years, because his scholarship ended, and he had to come back to seminary, and started teaching for a few more years at the seminary, and then it was there that he started kind of thinking about a new liturgy and arranging the old melodies not on a Western 4-part harmony, but on a kind of a horizontal line rather than vertical line. he did that, and he tried that with the seminarians first there, taught those boys there, did some concerts, and then he got kind of good experience there. But his goal was to bring the sacred music out to the concert halls, which at that time was not done. So the liturgical music was only done in churches. They were not, it was forbidden to sing like liturgical songs in a concert hall. And for that reason, he started bringing those out and doing some concerts, which kind of started making enemies with some priests and some hierarchies. And they didn't like that because they said, these are basically not suitable for regular people listening to this. You shouldn't do this. It has to be kept only in the churches. But, he did it. He did it, and he didn't listen to them. Now, meanwhile, while he was at the seminary, he started collecting some secular music from villages. And he had asked his friends, because they were coming from different villages, those seminarians basically coming from different villages. So every time on summer when they were going back, he was telling them, when you come back, you need to bring me a new song from your village. Not only sacred song, but secular song, wedding songs, whatever you hear, new one, bring it to me. And they would bring, and he would start collecting those, and he would start basically notating those, because they would kind of learn the song, and they would come and sing to him, and he would start notating those with the Limongian notation that I mentioned, because at that time he knew the Limongian notation. At that time also they were teaching the Limongian notation in the seminary. So then he himself also went from villages to villages, started collecting those songs and notating those, and especially when he came back from Germany after studying Western music, he did that also. So and because of him, now we have about 14 volumes of Armenian peasant songs, villager songs, all those early traditional songs that from the 20th century, early 20th century.
Wow. Wasn't he one of the first ethnomusicologists? Like, he's considered like a founder of ethnomusicology?
Oh, yes, yeah. So he was, not only just, first he was a priest, because he was ordained as a priest when he finished the seminary. But he was a musician, he's an ethnomusicologist, he was a composer himself, and he was a good performer. Actually had a good voice too. Good voice. And he recorded one track, a few songs actually, when he was visiting Germany, and then from Germany he went to England. At that time, the recording had started with the gramophone earlier, time. So he recorded a few of his songs, and we have his voice actually. We have his voice with those old kind of 78 kind of recording records, we have those. So then he collected all those songs, but because of some issues that started at the mother church, that he started bringing this sacred music out of the church and to the concert halls. He had to leave and go to Western Armenia, basically in Istanbul, because he found that people there supported him. And his dream was to start a conservatory there and start teaching. When he went there, immediately was able to put a choir together of 300 singers. So mixed kind of choir, mixed choir. And he started arranging the songs that he had collected, the melodies that he had collected. Some of them, the secular ones, like folk songs, and some of them the liturgical songs. He started arranging those in 4 parts and giving concerts until the 1915, which he was arrested with 150 of the intellectuals in Turkey, and he was sent to basically death camp in Middle Anatolia. But he was fortunate because he had a lot of friends, Turkish friends and intellectuals, and even American friends, because they knew him from the concerts that he had done. They were able to interfere and intervene, and they were able to get him back, free him. 2 of the, I think there were 2 kind of writers, Turkish writers, that were able to talk to the officials, and then American ambassador at that time, Henry Morgenthau, was another one that was able to speak with the officials and tell them, to return him. So he was able to return back, but because that toll that he took, he was taken to death camp, basically. And then in the middle of the road, basically, when they were taking him, he had seen a lot of people killed. A lot of his friends, a lot of children, so while he was getting, taken there, and that kind of affected his mind. And after he came back, his friends helped him to move to Paris, to France. But he was not in a situation after that to do anything, and unfortunately, he lived another more than 20 years, but in a seclusion, in a psychiatric hospital. He was not able to produce anything after that. So whatever we got from him is before the genocide. Before this genocide happened, and he was not able to even put those together in volumes. Later, fortunately, was able to find his papers and this and that, and in Paris they were able to collect those, and then they sent those back to Armenia. And in Armenia, as I said earlier about Robert Atayan, the musicologist, was able to get those and put those together, and because of that, we have about 14 volumes of his music. But we would have had more, actually, if because a lot of them were lost during genocide and during transportation of this music to there. And so so he did. That's why he did a major contribution to Armenian music, because if he had not collected those, all these melodies would have been forgotten and lost.
And how much of the liturgical music did he preserve in contrast to the folk music? Like, did he have a part to play in preserving the sacred music as well?
Yes. Although, as I said, he was not able to even finish all the arrangement of the Divine Liturgy, all the hymns. Later, some of his students were able to kind of put together, because what he was doing, he was like arranging one song, and he was teaching that to the choir at that time with the 300 students that he had, and there was no paper or even staff with a staff notation paper kind of to write those and distribute to all the 300 students. So what he was doing, he was teaching them orally those songs. Soprano part first, and then the tenor part, and this and that. So they didn't even have all those writings. So later, all these students, some of these students who were kind of talented, that they remembered some of these songs, came together and started writing their parts. And because of that, we were able to put these together and kind of complete all the divine liturgy music. So he didn't even finish the divine liturgy music. But one thing that also he was able to do when he was traveling from church to another church, for example, and he would hear a new kind of melody, he would write down there, and he would put the name of the person who was singing, actually. And
just to summarize, it sounded like you were saying the Komitas, he did have a part to play in a preservation of the Armenian liturgy, but he wasn't even able to finish it because of his extra duties with the choir. And so he really preserved all the Armenian folk music, but he also had a part to play in preserving the liturgical music as well, just maybe not to the same degree as with the folk music.
Yes, I mean, he collected a lot of folk music and then sacred music, but he did just a few, like when he was visiting the church, as I said, he was, if he would hear a new hymn that one of the deacons or one of the priests would sing, he would notate those and put the name of the person there that he was singing, and the place. So that way now we know that, for example, this version of the song comes from, for example, this area in this song. So that's a good kind of thing that he was doing. But he basically, just like Magar Mailian, he also took the sacred music melodies from the Catholicos Georg IV. So what happened, Georg IV, who established the Armenian Theological Seminary in Echmiadzin, he was from also Western Turkey, Western Armenia, and he knew all the hymns, a lot of hymns. So when he became a Catholicos in Mother Church, he brought somebody by the name Nigoros Tashchian, who knew how to notate the Limongian notation, the 20th century notation. So, and then he told the Tashchian to notate all the sharagans, all the hymns of that time that he was singing. So he was singing, and then Tashchian was notating those. So we have the divine liturgy based on his version, and then all the daily hours hymns, which is the sharagans, based on his singing. And Komitas and Mailian both used that version of the songs to arrange for the divine liturgy. There were, some of them were like 2-3 variations. Like, for example, for the Miser, for the Lord have mercy, for example, or Kyrie, there were 3-4 versions. Now, Mailian, for example, took one version, and then Komitas took another version, but they kind of arranged differently. Mailian kind of was more vertical harmony, and Komitas was more horizontal. And
do y'all ever do these liturgies not in purely monodically, in the way they would have been done 300 years ago, for example?
Well, most churches, I need to say that unfortunately they're doing monodically because they really don't have a 4-part choir singing. It is very hard to find a volunteer, because it's most of Armenian Church, basically everything is volunteer based. So you have to have choir volunteer, and you don't have good tenors, you don't have good basses or good altos, especially. So most people, if you enter, to an Armenian church, most places, especially in U.S., you hear basically just the melody, not the harmony. Just a few places, like in cathedral, probably because they are paid singers. If you go, you will hear harmony, but still, no, they don't have that many male voices either. It's mostly women. You will hear maybe two part.
And y'all introduced the organ in the 20th century as well, right?